Welcome to the Parent Advocate Podcast, a show where we celebrate, defend, support, and uplift the voices of the LGBTQIA community. I'm your host, Stephen Chacumba. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Lisette Trujillo.
Hey everyone, Lisette here, she, her, Aya. The mission of the Parent Advocate Podcast is to elevate conversations and reframe narratives around trans and non-binary youth to help change hearts and minds. Each week, we bring you our take on all things happening from the perspective of two parents of BIPOC transgender kids.
Lisette, we have someone so special on our show today, not only because he grew up down the way from me and he's a part of the dads, but we share the same first name.
Steven, I'm so excited to have Steven here. The other Steven in this episode. It's going to be a tender and thoughtful conversation, and I think our listeners are going to love it.
Well, good luck figuring out who you're talking to when you're interviewing us today, but we'll let the audience figure that out. So welcome everyone once again to the Parent Advocate Podcast. Let's get started. Lisette, it has been a week. I know I typically let you go first, but I'm just going to have to spill because so much has happened. The most important thing, and I'm just going to say it, we got into South by Southwest. Yeah. Lisette, our documentary will be screened on Saturday, March 14th, and Sunday, March 15th, and Tuesday, March 17th. And we are going to have Dwayne Wade in the house. I'm so excited. He is flying in a private jet from an NBA game, and then he's going to fly out to the Oscars. But he was like, this is so important. I will make a way to be there. And so it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. It's happening. I could talk about so many other things, but like literally, it's consumed me since Wednesday when we learned that we in fact had gotten in. And now it's just been a whirlwind of activity. I can't even begin to tell you all the stuff. They sent me something about like getting my makeup done when I get down there. Meet the makeup team. I've got a pre-launch party this Thursday. There's so much going on. I can't even begin to tell you all of it.
Steven, you're going to be like a fancy superstar advocate. Are you excited?
Am I excited? Am I black?
Okay. No, but like, I guess that's like the wrong question. I know you're excited, but like, are you like excited for the world to see it? It's like you're birthing a baby. Like people are going to get to meet your baby for the first time.
Yes. Our audience can't see this right now, but I had these t-shirts made with the lockup of the dads on the front and the logo of the Dads Foundation on the back. I got 50 of them, and we are going to be rocking through the streets of Austin, Texas, 50 deep. 50. I'm just going to be handing them away. You may not even know who I am and what this t-shirt is about, but you're going to be walking around Austin, Texas wearing it. Best believe.
You're going to make sure Dwayne Wade gets it too.
Come on now. I'm going to sign his. I'm going to put my signature on his shirt.
You're like, just so you know.
This is for you. This is special for you. So beyond that, I have an absolute local younger brother. The one that I don't speak to is absolutely local. He has now attempted to reach not only me, my mother, my other brother, all of my children, to put them on notice about how bad a person I am. I have taken up so much space, so much free space in his brain. I don't even know what to do with it. And I probably shouldn't even talk about this because it's just like, if he ever hears it, he'd be like, but it's just like, if you don't check for what I'm doing, just let me be. I'm letting you be. I don't get that. I don't understand how people who have such problems with other people go out of their way to antagonize those people that they have a problem with. If you don't like me, just let me be. You go your way, I'll go mine. I just don't understand it. I mean, someone's gonna have to like explain that to me. What is the psychological diagnosis for people who act like this? Because the GOP is like this, you know, trans films are like this, J.K. Rowling is like this. Like there are people who are just like hell bent on like being mad at other people for no good reason.
Well, and for listeners who might not remember, your brother's been notoriously unsupportive.
Absolutely.
Supporting Hobbs. And so you stepping back was like, I'm going to ride for my kid all day. And if you don't support him, you're out. And so what was he saying to all, like, what did your kids say?
Hey, my kids know that their uncle is plumb local. They got the dossier, and so they pay that fool no never mind. And they're not even aware of the full totality of his foolishness. But it's like every once in a while, like, now mind you, my brother told me that he was still riffing about some shit about me to him. So it's not even like he's telling me, like, I'm not bothered in the least bit because cut him off. Can't email me, can't phone me, don't know my mailing address. So it's just like I don't really interact, but every once in a while something seeps in, and it's just my brother giving me an FYI, being like, "Hey, just FYI, your brother's tripping again." My other brother did it a few months ago. He's like, "FYI, your brother's tripping again." My mom did it a few months ago. She's like, "FYI, your brother's tripping again." I'm glad they're putting me on notice, but I'm like, makes me never mind because he can't get to me. Well, he almost got to me when he texted my son. When he texted Chima, I was like, I was finna go punch that motherfucker in his face, but I was like, nope, because that's a response and that's what he wants. I'm not gonna give him that. I'm not gonna give him any of that. But it's cray. It's cray. Enough about me. What's going on with you?
I mean, besides the Epstein of it all and being afraid to look at Instagram, I deleted my TikTok.
Congratulations.
I'm never on it. So, like, I was like, it's fine. We're done with you. So, I'm Twitter free, TikTok free. And oh my God, Steven, our listeners don't know this. You don't know this, but I have a wind phobia. I live by the sea now. So, I try not to be afraid of the wind, right? Like, I've been brave. I've been in the wind. But yesterday there was 100-mile winds that blew out the Taco Bell windows in our ayuntamiento area. Like literally, I'll have to send you the video. It just like blew, like trees got blown over. There was a
I'm so sorry. I am so sorry that I laughed. How can somebody have a wind phobia and then in the next breath talk about 100-mile winds? Like you seriously have to have healed yourself because otherwise you should be comatose.
No, Jose was like, are we going on our morning walk? And I was like, oh, I think you should go without me because I read the wind advisory. Who was down to still go? And I was like, no. I watched our little, like the little chair in our back porch area just like slowly move throughout the day because of the wind. I was like, I'm not going outside. I went outside for very little, like short jaunts yesterday. I only did 4,600 steps. That's how little I moved around. So today, luckily, the wind was a little tamer. It was like 35-mile winds and not 100. But the videos that came out, they're crazy. And then one of the other parents that we know is living in Portugal, and there's huge floods happening in Portugal and in the south of Spain. And so it's just been like really interesting to live on the other side of the world and see climate crisis really kind of still be center for people who are trying to stay sane in the midst of all the Trump chaos. Also, on the back end, for our listeners who might not know, I still help out virtually where I can organize against anti-trans policy back home. And we have 15 anti-trans bills right now, 3 of which are going to go to the ballot. So that's been a little stressful, just hearing from families who are feeling it so much. And Daniel's just excited. He got like the official email of like, you're in school. Here it is. Here's the remaining things we need. Also, I know that the world is on fire and I know that things are crazy, but like Bad Bunny has been my Instagram feed, which was a reprieve from all the Epstein file drops because that was hard. And so I've been like thriving.
Well, listen, let's not get blown away with our updates and get into today's topics.
Let's do it.
All right, Lisette, I'm big mad right now at the AMA. I'm big mad at the AMA for recommending delaying any gender affirming surgeries until a patient reaches adulthood. This was reported in the New York Times that the American Medical Association is recommending no gender affirming care surgeries until patients reach 19. The problem that I have with the AMA coming out with such a statement is that the AMA already knows that gender affirming care for minors doesn't occur. And I'm not saying it never occurs, but the recommendation is that patients wait until at least 18 before having those surgeries. And the AMA also knows that only in the most extreme circumstances of dysphoria is it even ever permissible, and it's still 16. So what the fuck?
And to extend it to 19 as the recommendation to fall under that Trump executive order around gender affirming care not being accessible until the age of 19 is a whole lot of fuckery, right? It's definitely bending the knee. It's also feeding into that idea that kids are having surgeries, which is not true. Adolescent youth are receiving care. All gender affirming care is done at the appropriate time when it needs to be administered. It's not like our kids are going through a machine one day and then the next day they're like, whoop, medical care accessed and done. It just doesn't happen that way.
The thing that makes me so mad, well, another thing that makes me so mad is the fact that this came from the Plastic Surgeons Association. This wasn't even something that had been studied or researched or was a problem. They weren't seeing this increase of people coming back saying that they were dissatisfied with their surgery. This comes out of a lawsuit from one patient who won legitimately because the doctor, his care fell below the applicable standard of care. And so that's perfectly acceptable for the single doctor who doesn't do the right thing to suffer the consequences of it. It shouldn't now permeate to the entire medical establishment when one bad actor does something. I don't understand why that's the case only when it comes to gender affirming care. When you have a bad response to your hip replacement or your knee surgery or that clavicle surgery or your rhinoplasty or your boob job, all the rest of the practitioners who provided those surgical services don't suddenly have to no longer give those services. The government doesn't come in and say, stop, you can't do that anymore. We are going to change our guidelines because her nose job looks terrible. That's bullshit. It's only with gender affirming care that they act this way. And it's infuriating.
I also just think that people who are listening need to understand that access to care has always been very limited and very difficult for most people to get. And when you hear these stories that come out of the New York Times, and I was burned in the Emily Bazelon, like I was like her token brown girl quote, it's predominantly very wealthy middle class people who are accessing care and paying out of pocket. And so you're talking about class distinction and access and going to clinics and doctors that normally the rest of us wouldn't be going to, right? Like we would be going to a clinic where we would try to get our insurance to approve. Insurance approval alone takes forever and is a nightmare. And so it's just not realistic. It's not the real process for which trans youth are actually accessing care. And again, it's always been done in dialogue with a care team. My child was not able to access care without having a clinical psychologist, without having a pediatrician, and having a care team that was devoted to him and had been seeing him for years before we were having discussions around what gender affirming care would look like for him.
According to Trump, children are having surgeries at school without their parents' knowledge.
Teachers can't even afford pencils. Like, what is he talking about? They're defunding schools and underpaying teachers. This is ridiculous.
Well, since we're talking about ridiculous schools, following a campus-wide course review, Texas A&M University announced on Friday the elimination of its Women and Gender Studies degree program. So apparently, you can no longer go to Texas A&M and get a degree in women and or gender studies.
You can't even learn about Socrates. Stephen, this is also the same state that now has like, I don't know what the appropriate word is, but like lawyers no longer have to be members of the American Bar Association. Like they're completely removing access to education. I mean, this is a fundamental, like, I'm losing my words, but like to not have to be part of the American Bar Association or to not have gender studies. Come on.
The dumbing down of our population is happening at the highest levels. When I read about the Texas removal of ABA accreditation from its law schools, I was like, what the fuck? I would be so mad if I attended a Texas law school which lost its ABA accreditation because now my degree is only good for Texas. I can't go to any other state and take any other state's bar because the ABA accreditation that my school once had is now being removed. So now I have to go to another state, presumably sit through their course requirements in order to sit for their state bar. Give me a fucking break. And now, because some kid had a viral video jumping bad at their teacher or their professor about gender, it's now not being taught. Like, that's just it. Our response to a viral video on social media is to remove a whole degree program from our offering as a university. Like, what kind of foolishness is that? Like, seriously, buyer beware. Do not go to school in Texas. Do not get a medical degree in Texas. Do not practice medicine in Texas. Just don't be in Texas because they're trying to make your lives a living hell. And they're trying to make your people stupid.
Your children won't even learn about the Socratic method or any sort of important pieces of philosophy that we all had to learn when we were in college.
They will not know how to critically think for themselves, period.
And I don't know why I'm so stuck on Socrates, but still, like, I just found it fascinating that they're all of a sudden like going against educational norms or things that they've pushed on us for years. Only in Texas.
Well, moving on, because the fuckery doesn't end. Scouting America, formerly the Boy Scouts of America, was warned by the Department of War, aka the Pentagon, that continued funding was contingent upon their continued compliance with President Trump's executive order mandating the end of all DEI initiatives, which means that the trans inclusive policies of Scouting America is no more. And so the only people that will be allowed to join and remain in their ranks are people who were assigned male at birth. And as you know, Boy Scouts of America is a nonprofit, like many other organizations that require on funding, donation, grants to continue operations. And this organization is one such organization who relies to a very large extent on government funding to continue its business. In fact, it was like almost inextricably intertwined with the government at its foundation. So the fact that they're bending the knee is no surprise.
I need our BIPOC people to listen to me when I say this. Anti-DEI initiatives that sound like they're just targeting transgender people will also harm us. Anytime you hear expansion of religious liberties and you think it's just going to throw out LGBTQ people, no. The fact that our federal government had to create policies that said, no, you are not allowed to discriminate against people of color based on your religion should remind us that it's not going to just harm trans people, right? Like, what will this do to young boys of color who are participating in Scouting America, which I didn't even know they had changed their name. Also, that's intense for the Department of War to like tell a nonprofit that they're on notice. I don't know, Stephen. I did not see this come down my feed, but I will tell you that when people think our movements, our rights are not entangled in the ways that they are, we're lying to ourselves. And we need to be protecting everyone in our communities. Because being trans is not a white people thing. You and I have heard this quite often. And we need to be protecting all of our people in all the ways in which we're seeing policy harm them and harm us.
Lisa, it's a function of controlling bodies, making us second guess who we are or how we show up in the world. And I think our next guest will really go a long way to helping us unpack some of these issues. So how about we get to them?
Let's do this. I can't wait.
Stephen Leidy is a father, co-parent, and parent advocate whose journey has been shaped by lived experience, loss, and ongoing self-reflection. A longtime Bay Area resident, Stephen brings honesty and humility to conversations about gender, grief, and what it means to show up for your children even when you're still figuring things out for yourself. As a father of a gender-expansive child, he has learned how personal history can surface in unexpected ways and how growth often begins by listening, taking accountability, and staying open. Stephen's story speaks to the complexity of parenting through change and the possibility of connection on the other side of fear. Everyone, please welcome Stephen Leidy to our show.
Hi, Stephen. I just want to say welcome to the Parent Advocate podcast. We've been both so excited to have you on. And before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that you shared a lot with us in preparation for this conversation about your upbringing, your family, like your inner life. When you think about gender now, what are the early experiences or messages that you recognize quietly shaped your understanding of it?
Gosh, when I was younger, gender wasn't like something where I was too kind of concerned if I was like boyish or what have you. Growing up with a brother, we had our own, identities ourselves of just being like goofball, rag-along kids who were out in the world. So as I got a little bit older, when I started understanding like gender and how I felt inside of my body, I was probably around, I would say 11 or 12 years old. And it was when my mother was going through breast cancer. that, I started kind of understanding what the body goes through and what changes can happen and how, it just doesn't involve in like a woman's body or a man's body. It was a sickness that just was hurting a body. And understanding and seeing that, I was started to like kind of formulate like, oh, it's not just like like we're like two separate things. We're kind of like the same, right? But we're classified in these genders. So I started to allow myself to kind of like smear between allowing myself to like go into my mom's closet a little bit and like try on her clothes. She had a prosthetic breast that I would like put on my chest to feel just to see what it like felt like, not as if I was saying or asking myself questions, am I inside of the right body or am I a trans person? Like back in the 80s, I didn't really have like any sort of, even understanding what a trans person was. It was more derogatory back then. But I think it was around that time where I started to allow myself to kind of explore and understand the freedoms outside of just like the gender moniker. Like, you're born a boy, you stay a boy, you like blue, you do these things, you play sports. And then I just started to, that was kind of like a big, freeing moment for myself. Yeah.
You have me choked up. I didn't even expect this to happen. My wife had breast cancer. She had a mastectomy and she had like an implant and it really bothered her. And to hear that your mother was going through that and that there was a prosthetic in the house and that was something that you were in your young space exploring, identity and bodies, and it just got me. I didn't even expect that. You've been really open with us about the shame that you carried around in your body and in your identity when you were younger. Can you talk about how those unresolved feelings showed up, or if they showed up at all, when Dexter shared his identity with you, and what it was like as a parent to be listening to your child talk about similar experiences that you had growing up?
Yeah, no, totally. It was, Dexter's fluid and he's always kind of been moving in one weird direction or another and expressing himself and really kind of like one of these like unique people where you're just kind of, if you stop staring, like it's going to change. Like he walks out of a room and comes back and it's different. When I started to see like this metamorphosis before he came to me and told me how he's expressing himself, how he feels gender wise, I would see this change and I would see myself and I would clench and it would hit me like a baseball bat because I remembered how much I struggled myself as a teenager. I'm an open book here, guys. So like I don't hold back. So I was sexually abused by a caretaker when I was 12 years old. And it caused me to start to become a person who overate because it was a defense mechanism to become like a yuck. I got really heavy and I didn't want to be there. Like I didn't want to be heavy. Like I would go to, like before I went to bed, I would go and I'd look in the mirror and I would lift up my shirt and I would say, oh, I hope I wake up and this is gone. So I was not even comfortable in my own body. I wanted it to change. I just didn't want it to be there. So when Dex started to show like, signs of just being more of like an alternative person and not the status quo, not that I wanted any of my kids to be that way. I was just like I saw myself and I felt the struggle and I became like a, hey, I like this, but how about you, change this part or that part. And like I realized, I still am realizing it now, that me going and say, how about you change this up? Dexter wasn't reading me saying like, oh, this is my dad just giving me advice. It was like, this is my dad rejecting who I am. And I was like, oh man, like, oh crap, like what did I do? And, luckily I caught it pretty quick. And Dexter's the type of person who has like the wherewithal and the cognition to be like, oh, like I hear what you're saying. I just needed to let him in. I needed to say, this is where it's coming from. And I told him, I was like, this, this still affects me today. I was like, even though, I got to the point where I, liked my body for what it was, I still go in the mirror and I lift up my shirt sometimes and I'll be like, you know what? You could lose a little weight. So these kinds of lifelong kind of like pounded in your head has followed me forever. And these fears of like Dexter having those same kinds of like brain frying mannerisms or like insecurities, I was like, I need to be open with him, and I need to let him in on everything. Like, he's a person who is he knows he's going to struggle. I just need to let him in, like, hey, dad struggled too. We're all in this together. If you don't tell me, I might ask. You might not want to talk to me about it, but like bridging the conversation of like, I'm afraid to talk about this because I don't know like what he knows. Now that Dexter understands like my personal experience, he's like, this guy gets it. Like, it might not be easy, it might not be the same experience, but at least I have, there's somebody that I can talk to who's like a family member who's like, safe. And that's what it is. It's all about safety.
Stephen had us jump into the deep end with the first two questions, right? Like, they're just like, they go in deep. And I think that has a lot to do with what you had shared in your bio information. What you're saying to me is really, really important, I think, for parents who are listening, because so many of us parent from our trauma, even though we don't want to. Most parents will parent from that way, that discomfort, that I don't want you to hurt in the same ways that I hurt. I don't want the world to challenge you in the ways that it challenged me. But it also gives us, I think, when we gain awareness and choose to disrupt that way of parenting, it gives us an openness, right? Like how you're like this dialogue, a conversation with our children in like, I experienced this and you're experiencing something. Is it similar? Like, we get to know each other in like these deeper ways, right? And so much of what you're saying, I think, is really important. Like, that often gets missed when we're seeing videos about parents talking about their support of their trans kids. It's like we often forget that we too have genders and sexualities. I struggled with an eating disorder as a young person into my young adulthood, right? It's something I talked about openly as well. I don't know if you struggled with this, because I see that you were trying to sort of like edit how Dexter would move into the world. A lot of editing, or ways in which I would sort of recognize that I was editing Daniel, came a lot from like conversations I remember my dad had with me around race and assimilation. Like, this is how you present yourself in the world. And obviously you're going to have a different understanding because we are different ethnicities, right? But
I'm a white guy. Yeah.
But editing ourselves and then editing our children for fear of how they're going to be treated in the world. I'm wondering what has been kind of tools and resources that you've given yourself, because when we give our children the freedom and permission to be authentically themselves, we are sort of liberating ourselves from a lot of that as well, right? What are some of those kind of tools you've given yourself? Like, as you've watched Dexter move through the world, being supported, how has that kind of like liberated you in a sense?
I was always kind of like a strange kid or an alternative kid, but a lot of it wasn't an authentic experience. I was a chameleon. I was a lot of what people wanted. And, after a lot of therapy and, going and finding the right partner and the right support, I look at Dexter's experience and the way that he holds himself. And just by seeing his authentic experience with the world that's around him, it really allowed me to stop putting up these barriers that I have on myself. Because I know the relationship that Dexter and I have with both my kids is very symbiotic. They're at a point, they're like 14 and 15 years old, almost 15 and 16. These kids are soaking up every type of mannerism that I am kind of expressing, micro expressions, micro angers, and all this other things. Kids are brilliant at picking up on those things. So as Dexter became more cognitive, I mean, they're always cognitive as kids, but, seeing Dex as like his authenticity, it almost allowed me to like mirror it back. Like, okay, like I don't need to fear like a stain or to be sloppy or to be unkept or like I was always a person who kind of felt like, I needed to have a clean home, a clean look, a clean bio, a clean everything, right? And because that was like the expression of myself. And I realized that like those kinds of mannerisms really kind of kept my kids in this like tight little, like I don't have any looseness. But the more like I saw my kids kind of being loose, I was like, they don't have to really understand what authenticity is right now because it's not a part of them. They're just them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is such a perfect experience to get from them. And it's like I get to, it's a thermoclepting, I get to steal their heat, right? And it's been a great experience with me understanding how to move around in the world more comfortably, how to express myself. That is, with the kids right now, they don't know every single demon that has like afflicted me or every detail of it. But the more that I see that they understand, the more that I can kind of express to them like who I am. And thank God, like I'm getting more into this authentic body because, before it was always like a person that I was trying to polish. I was always trying to like come across, and social media did not help that at all, because when social media came into it, it's like, oh, you're polished. People love your polish. You got to stay polished because like that's your persona. It took a little bit of me to like unwire all those kinds of perceptions of like what I need to be for everybody else to like what I need to be for my family, and really kind of latching on to the family guy, the dad, the advocate, the just the love dad, the adventure dad. And yeah, from then, I just kind of mirror how I feel for them, and they know to come to me if they have, I guess, any trip ups in experience, and know that I'm going to be there and be a straight shooter.
What you're talking about is perfectionism in this really wonderful way. I went to Catholic school. I think I've shared this. I went to Catholic school and there was a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Cajigas. I always remember this lesson. She asked us this simple question of like, if you could walk through the door and life be perfectly the way you wanted to, or you could walk through a second door and choose to experience all of it before you got there, which would you choose? And I at the time was like, door A. And she talked about like perfectionists being like, there's two types of perfectionists, like people who self-sabotage and are messy all the time, and perfectionism in everything needing to be perfect and neat because it comes from a lack of self-worth and not understanding that we're like truly messy, wholly embodied, like whole embodied people with complexities, right? And I love hearing you talk about this as like a way in which you're engaging in your parent journey as well. So I just wanted to say that, to say thank you, because so many people struggle with that,
Don't say
Yeah.
nothing, Steven. Don't say nothing. This is not a time for you to respond. You have to listen now. She jumped ahead of me. My mic was off and I didn't know I was talking. And I was just like, oh, she can't even hear me. So I love this conversation that we're having because I think what a lot of people hear about parents of gender expansive children is how much we are working to turn our children into something that they're not. I don't think they appreciate that life is messy, and life is messy for all of us. And because life is messy for all of us, we are responding and doing our best to the situation that presents itself to us. We don't have some grand designs of who our children are going to be. And oftentimes the grand designs that we have are of who our children are going to be don't match who our children actually end up sharing that they are. And we have to get in line with who our children are, and not this expectation that society has put out about the pink and blues of the world and how you have to line up. And it's just so fascinating for the three of us with our very imperfect backgrounds to be doing our level best to support our children, notwithstanding all the traumas that we have experienced growing up that we're consciously not trying to put on our children, but recognizing inform who we are all the while. And we kind of started off talking about just the very difficult things about your life that you've shared with us as we got ready for this episode. And I'm curious to know, how have you managed to like separate and to create that distance between the trauma you experienced and that is still ever present, and your desire to not only protect your children from that trauma,
Totally.
but raise them in a way that they are not incapable of responding to the difficulties that life often brings, especially when we're talking about gender expansive children for whom, as we can see, life is particularly difficult. How have you managed that?
I wasn't a helicopter parent, but I definitely was go run around, skin your knee, get dirty, eat the dirt. It was almost like I manicured this, like, I guess, rough safe zone. We did a lot of, outdoor exploring. So it wasn't in an urban setting. It was more in nature where they could kind of just like get lost and be free as younger people. And, as a person like going into school and understanding the kind of, experience that I had, and not like put my trauma and experience into them and say they're going to have to go through the same thing kind of like in a different atmosphere. But, as far as like protecting my kids, it was around a very kind of pivotal moment for them, like in middle school areas when COVID happened and we all kind of got shut down. We're all like stuck inside. And that's when Dexter and his brother, like really, I mean, they've always been bonded because they're only 11 months apart, but that's when they like really kind of like depended on each other. And, a part of me, I have a brother who's 15 months younger. And me and my brother, we were like the back-to-back kids, like he had my six. And, I always felt like my back was protected, like always, like even until I moved away from Philly, I always felt like I had this connection and having the kids built in that kind of, sibling protection was like stage one, like perfect. I'm like so blessed that has happened. And two, Dexter shows to me that he is a smart, capable person. As far as like protection goes, like when Dex came out and he told me, he's like, I'm a boy. I feel like a boy. I'm a boy, Dad. This is how we're gonna do it moving forward. This is how I want you to refer to me. I was kind of like thrown off, and I was like a part of me was like to protect him. I'm like, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pause on being like overly like I'm in. Like I'm just gonna call you Dex. What you say goes. It was more of like, you know what? I need a minute. I need to figure out on my side like how I'm going to approach this. I just need a little bit of time to kind of understand like how I'm going to kind of like wrap my head around this. And a part of my protection was like, okay, how do I do this the greatest way? How do I do this the best way? Part of my perfectionism kind of leached in there as well. It was like, okay, I'm going to find, the best groups to be with. I'm going to join the best advocacy groups. I'm going to get the best doctors. I'm going to go to UCSF. I'm going to know all the things that there are. I'm going to join the Dad's Foundation and, meet a whole bunch of dudes to be the most awesome group ever. And part of it like really has helped as far as like navigating. But the thing I realized that, I gripped so hard on being like the best and the most protective that like this is going to be the best outcome for him. And I realized like once I started like letting go and kind of like having him dictate a little bit more because he's 14, 15 years old, like he gets it. He has his own voice. I was like, oh shit. Like I was like smothering the situation. I thought to Dexter, like I was being like the champion, like Dad gets it. He's my safety rob, blah, blah, blah. When it was like good at first, but like after like a lot, he was like, I just want to be a kid, man. I love your flags. I love your buttons. I love your advocacy. I love your t-shirts. I love the way that you talk about it, but this is my experience. So I don't need you to stand right behind me to tell me what I'm experiencing it because I'm doing it.
Pump
I'll
your
come
brakes,
back and
Dad.
yeah,
Pump your
I'll
brakes.
come if there's something that's going wrong. I'll definitely let you know. But like, let me kind of figure this out. If I'm ever in danger, obviously he would let me know. But I just love the fact that like, not that he's on it or what have you, but he has taken the role where, he has seen the protection and he like knows where like it can come up, where the gates are, but he kind of strays away now, and I'm just like, okay, like I have to be fine with it. I can find him on his phone, right? And that's pretty much it. So other than that, I want him to have his experience because like when I was growing up, oh my God, like I grew up on the other side of Trenton, New Jersey on the Delaware River. And if my mom knew like a quarter of the crap that I was going through, she would have a heart attack. And I was like, you know what? I want my kids to have that. Like, I want them to have like the weird stuff, the stuff that they are never going to tell me. So a part of me was like, okay, I need to relax a little bit of my protection because I've raised them to be good stewards of themselves and to be shake your hand, look in your eye, be very good members of society. So yeah, it's weird to have them like kind of have that now as only, 14 and 15-year-olds. But I mean, yeah, I just know they're good. They're strong kids.
Lisa, I have to tell you, Steven brought Jackie and Dex to my house in Trenton around Thanksgiving. And he's like, you're going to meet Mr. Chukumba. He brought them in. He introduced them both, looked me in the eye, shook my hand. And I shared this story about how I met some other dad's kids call me by my first name. And I was like, whatever you do, if you ever meet a black man, a black adult, never as a child refer to that person by their first name. It is not a good look. And they may or may not say anything, but you always are going to get brownie points and gold stars for knowing that cultural thing to do. Great kids. So glad that this California dude is in New Jersey from Philly, knows about Trenton. I was just like, how how two Stevens from Trenton in the dads didn't know each other until we ended up in Minnesota or some shit. I was like, this is the most random ever, but love this dude, love his boys, love the way he's raising them. And now I'm going to let you ask your question.
I mean, I just love everything that you're saying. And I think even parents who do not have trans kids would resonate with this because it's all developmental, right? Like discovering who we are, whether it be our gender, our sexuality, our likes, our aesthetic, as the kids call it today. And like parents learning imperfectly how to let go and be like, you can have, we don't keep secrets, you can have surprises. How do we keep you safe? How do you keep yourself safe so that you can move through the world in a way that is, I just keep saying safe. And I think it has to do with a lot of the Epstein shit coming out. I've always loved the safety of my child. And I think a lot of parents will resonate listening to this because having a trans child is no different than having any other child, right? And so much of this conversation is that. I'm obsessed right now with this talk because I haven't had a talk with two dads that are like, yeah, no, like this is just parent shit and we're figuring it out. The best advice I ever got from my mom, and we had a complicated relationship. The best thing she ever told me was, you've never been a parent before and they've never been alive before. And so you're figuring it out together. Each, phase of life is going to be new. And so I'm curious to know, what were some, especially because this is about the dads, right? We're talking about the Dads Foundation and like the dad, this is how you and Steven connected. What was it like to be in community with other dads who were having similar experiences, but maybe from different backgrounds? What did you find the most kind of surprising in it all? And what were some similarities in parenting trans kids? Did you see a through line as you connected?
Being with the dads was like a baptism. It surrounded me wholly. It surrounded me with like so quick. There was just an aura of these dudes that we fell into love with each other, that I fell in love with these guys so quickly. And I did not know what to expect. I knew that I had a lot of questions. I went into it feeling like an imposter because I didn't have background where I was going and talking with legislature. I wasn't writing papers or doing dissertations. I did not have a podcast. I wasn't filming a movie. I did not have to move to Canada. I did not have to move to Costa Rica. I did not live in Texas where people were just being persecuted. I was just like a regular dad who was, I guess in the experience under a year. And like at first I was like, ugh, like I didn't think that I was supposed to be there. But like after talking with, we everybody just like talked and talked and talked. And, I let people talk and Stephen let people talk. And we were all just like a bunch of gabbers, a lot of us. And just seeing the experience of all the dads, like I look at these people and they become like such friends so fast, like knowing their names and their kids' names and their experiences and the vulnerability that we all had. Like we just came in there and we're like, it was like camp, but like it was like camp where like every kid you felt safe to like do whatever, you could say whatever and you're safe. You could do whatever and you're safe. And, like I connected with like everybody for different reasons. I could start naming off like all the people that I was just like, I love them for that reason and that reason and that reason. But it was like a collection of like, emotional all-stars who their superpower was their honesty, their vulnerability, their willingness to connect, and how happy they were to tell their stories and see how like all the web kind of like we're like, oh shit, we're from the same thing. Like we're connected. We're not what is it, Voltron, where like all the pieces come together, click, click, click. Like, no, we are one entity. We don't disconnect from each other. Like in some way we're all kind of woven emotionally, spiritually. So like being able to experience like the dads and being invited there by Ed Diaz, like I said from the very beginning, it was a baptism of just like I don't have to be afraid. Even my dumb questions can be reformulated, or maybe like some ways that I express myself that might not be like the way that's more comfortable with a lot of the trans community. It's like, well, we don't say that. How about we approach it this way? And there's no wrong. It's all just like teaching, and it was beautiful.
I just have to say that's like the best testament to what the dads is that I've ever heard. Like, I'm not bigging up myself. I'm just saying, like, wow, because I know I felt that way the first trip that we took. At least that was at that trip, even though like this was the dads, it was like a family affair. And we went out to the woods and we were all together. We were eating together. We were having meals together. We were sharing stories. We were just expressing ourselves. And when I met Jose, and well, I'd known Jose, I'd met him through P-Tech, but when I met Peter, who I'd never met, when I met Dennis, who I'd only dealt with kind of like tangentially, Wayne and Frank, it was like this opportunity to just be amongst dads who were going through similar things, but different things, and coming from vastly different walks of life, but all having that connectedness because of their experience, because of their children. It's something that you can't really replicate in other spaces. Like, you can be a part of a dad's group and, be the men on a soccer team and connect with the dads on the soccer team, and you have kids that play together, but it's not the same thing. Like, I don't feel that same level of connectedness to the dads on Fuji's soccer team as I feel with y'all. It's just not the same. And I wonder if you had one takeaway from that first retreat that you came on with us. One thing that impressed you more than anything else. I know this is probably going to be a difficult question, but what do you think that one takeaway is from your first retreat?
My biggest takeaway was it didn't matter where I was in my experience, that I belonged. That it didn't matter if my kids started identifying when they were 5, or if they knew that when they were 2, or if they have top surgery, or if they're on any sort of medication. If you are a parent of a trans kid, you are in a very, very lucky and beautiful group. It doesn't matter where you are in your child's experience. I belong there. My takeaway was just, I need to start accepting myself where I am. It doesn't matter how knowledgeable I am. It doesn't matter if I am writing dissertations or showing up at Congress or whatever it is. My experience is important. My experience is authentic. And as long as I'm loving and willing and want to hold my children or my child up to the highest degree, that I belong. There are a lot of people that made me feel that way. A lot of people. Carlos, mostly. I connected with him pretty hardcore. So I can't wait to see him South by Southwest.
It's so funny that you're sharing this experience you had, because I remember when Stephen first joined P-Tech, he organized all the dads on P-Tech to get on a call. And my husband, Jose, he's like a classic Aquarian. He's like a loner, artist. He is the youngest of 10. He's like, I grew up with friends that I wanted or didn't want sometimes, but he adored Steven. So he would get on these early morning Saturday calls to like be in this space with Steven. And Jose was like, it's kind of cool to be in that shared space because it's all dads. And it's so different in the way we talk to each other than, because I was running a parent community in our place. And he's like, it's different because it's just these guys talking to each other in the way that we know how. And so I think it's beautiful to see Stephen kind of create that vision in a broader way that expands and allows people in. I also think when I'm hearing you both speak, that need for belonging, I think also comes from the fact that so many of our loved ones reject us in the ways that they reject our children. And we lose friends and we lose family and we lose connections. I think about this memory often. There was this woman who we would do play dates when Daniel was really small. And I remember I shared on Facebook because I was like, I don't have the capacity to like be individually. So I was like, I'll talk to my family in person, but everybody else gets a Facebook post. And I remember bumping into her at a Target after I'd shared my post on Facebook. And she was like explaining to me how she was not going to adhere to my Facebook post. She was not going to support it, wasn't going to vibe with it. And I was like, that's nice. Well, good seeing you. And I rolled on with my Target cart. And this need to belong, I think, speaks volumes. And I think that it's so important, regardless of gender, for people to have a space where they feel safe and seen and acknowledged, right? If you were talking to parents today, which you are, right, on this podcast, you're talking to
Yep.
parents who are listening. And oftentimes I think no one listens to our podcast. And then I get messages from people that are like, no, like we're listening. I sometimes feel like we're speaking into the void. What are ways in which parents can acknowledge, because sometimes you get like, you know, cis fragility where like the parents get all up in their own feelings, they're like having their own experience in proximity. What are some tools for empathy that you would give to parents on how to also nurture their children's need for belonging? Because kids have a hard time communicating that, right? So as you look at yourself and your need to belong, what would be some takeaways that you would give parents? Give us 3. How to foster that belonging for themselves, but also help their children foster that sense of belonging.
You know, the first thing that I did to make sure that, I mean, Dexter's kind of a loner. I know that he needed to have some sort of sense of community. And I knew it wasn't going to be sports. We tried it. There was a couple of things to like kind of assimilate or what have you. I just took a step back and I was like, well, what is he interested in? So a part of it was like, okay, really kind of dig into what his interest was. And his interest was like, it wasn't even like anything specific. He just was fidgety with his hands. He always had, you know, like Play-Doh. He was always like making something. So I got him in a ceramics class. So like I paid attention to like what his interests were. And his ceramics class has like, you know, 7 or 8 people. He doesn't talk to them a whole bunch. He knows them and they know him. It's getting him involved in like a social atmosphere where, you know, he feels like it's his world. He is in charge of it. So that was one important thing that I was like, okay, I can understand him better because I'm giving him more of a chance to express himself. It really is, I guess, you know, I'll kind of like lean in it to the part 2 is, yeah, it's like, see how your kids are expressing themselves and foster it in a way where they can do it constructively. Us as parents, we don't have to, you know, we don't have to censor or edit our kids. I mean, we do, but, you know, to a degree, but allowing them and really kind of supporting their uniqueness. You know, there's so much of us that kind of tamp these things down because of fear. And, you know, what I've alluded to in the beginning of the podcast is that, you know, I feel as if when I started to try to like change or edit or mold my son in a way where I think that was going to make him safer, it was more of like, I felt like I was kind of, you know, maybe just silencing him. So having a place where they can express themselves freely. And I guess another way where parents can empathize with their kids is, you know, it's something that I tried to start with my son, but it didn't work. So I'm not sure how good this is that, you know, I tried to start this like pass off journal where each night, like I would write something that I was feeling and then I would slip it under his door and he would write something that he was feeling. And then like the next night you would write it back. It didn't happen, you know, the way that I wanted it to. It was more of like an exercise that I thought was going to be very cute. But the overall idea is like checking in with your kid to see how they're feeling. You know, it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be like a deep dive. But the one thing that I really found was like how the conversation got better is like I was reciprocating. Like I was saying, well, my day was like this. And I wouldn't be like how, you know, like work sucked or, you know, a client is being a jerk or what have you. But it was more of like talking about like daily issues or struggles and how to overcome them because they're people. You know, they have to learn how to like get over their own things. And if they're not always in a place where they can kind of figure out obstacles on their own, they'll hear your obstacles and see how you have traversed them. So I guess my third one is, you know, treat your kids as intelligent, brilliant people because they're listening. They are. And pretty soon they're going to outpace you and you're going to be the dumb one in the dust.
This has been such an amazing conversation, and I know you have to go. So the final question that we have for you today, because I think there's so much growth in you and there's so much earnestness and authenticity to your story. And I think people could learn a lot from just listening to you and listening to this episode today. And so for other fathers who may find themselves standing where you were, confused, grieving, dealing with the ghosts of the past, past traumas, fears of getting it wrong, what do you hope that that they hear when they listen to your story?
I hope that they hear that the thing that we are working towards is connection, be it ways to communicate with other parents around you, ways to communicate with your own children, ways that you can communicate with yourself. Understanding that it is okay to fumble. It's okay to stumble out there and not get it right and be clunky. God damn, be clunky, but be something. Be moving forward, because if you're clunky, you can smooth out the edges. If you don't say anything and you don't learn how to communicate, it's just going to be a pressure cooker. So be okay that you're not perfect. Be okay that you're not going to get it right. Clunky is the way of the walk. If you do it with love and you do it with authenticity, the person that you're communicating with will know that you're doing it in a way that you're trying to be productive and you're trying to connect. You're trying to connect with your kids and the people around you in your community.
Stephen, thank you so much for this amazing, heartfelt, vulnerable conversation. I appreciate you. I am so looking forward to seeing you in a month at South by Southwest, where we will be premiering our feature-length film, The Dads, having its world premiere. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It was really a joy to have you on here.
Lizette, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Now it's time for our recurring segment, Allies and Assholes, where we highlight individuals or groups who are supporting the LGBTQI community on the one hand and call out straight up assholes who are trying to move us all backwards on the other. Lisette, who are we talking about today?
Oh, I'm so excited about our ally of the week. They are none other than Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, better known as Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny is seizing the Super Bowl stage not just to perform, but to honor queer culture and Puerto Rican LGBTQI icons in a way that challenges rigid norms and celebrates inclusion on one of the world's largest platforms. Stephen, I've loved seeing him embrace gender fluidity and queer celebration. He's worn full drag in his work, consistently shown up to fight for queer and trans rights, and refused to let the backlash silence his message of solidarity. Even as critics try to politicize his performance, Bad Bunny remains steadfast, using visibility to uplift voices that are too often marginalized and remind us that empowerment and joy are radical acts.
He said, do you remember last year when they lost their minds over Kendrick Lamar? When they lost their minds, I didn't watch it. What was that? What was happening? They were all butthurt. I can only imagine the heads that are gonna explode when Benito strolls out on stage in a long flowing pink skirt with a tutu or a half top. Come on now. Like, they are going to lose their shit. Can't wait.
I'm so excited. I was obsessed with Kendrick's performance, and I can't tell you that I am just as obsessed for Benito's. It's gonna be amazing. And I think it's important for us to see these very brilliant, talented people amplifying messages that speak to their people, their culture, and make people feel seen and represented in moments when we aren't. And this is why El Malo Conejo is our ally of the week.
Congratulations to Bad Bunny. And now onto our asshole of the week. They said this week's asshole, it can't go to just one person. It has to go to a group. This is a group prize. And our asshole of the week is the GOP. Now, Republicans held a hearing ostensibly on free speech and immigration amidst rising protests and accountability calls for ICE actions, including fatal shootings in Minnesota. However, they instead invited a known anti-trans activist, allowing the session to devolve into an anti-trans rhetoric as opposed to addressing the real concrete issues and abuses facing this nation. By ignoring the real human cost of unchecked ICE power and instead fixating on attacking transgender people, it's really clear to anyone who's paying attention that they cared more about scoring political points than doing their job of oversight and protecting vulnerable communities. I said it at the top of the show, and I'm going to say it again now. Everything is about trans people in these fucking people's minds. Literally everything.
And for a political party that's obsessed with polling, really doing nothing to help the American people other than give them, sound bites that they can, repost and shout out at people. It's really interesting that they're not following the polling that just came out last week that says that their party is actually tired of hearing this anti-trans rhetoric, that they feel like they've gone too far. And so again, here they are hijacking an important judicial hearing around the violence and terror that ICE is inflicting on Minnesotans and deflecting by using transgender people as political pawns.
For ignoring real harm to instead focus on bullshit culture war grievances. This is why the GOP is our asshole of the week. Well, that's our show for today, folks. I want to thank Stephen Leidy for joining us today. And I got to give it up to my incredible co-host, Lisa Trujillo, for helping hold space for vulnerable conversations and putting a little wind beneath my wings.
Stephen, I loved talking to the both of you today. It was such a wonderful conversation about parenting. And I think that's what I love most about you is how much you love your children. And it shines in this podcast over and over again. And so thank you. I couldn't do this without you. And of course, we couldn't continue to do our podcast without all of you, our listeners. So thanks for tuning in to the Parent Advocate Podcast.
And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, Substack, and YouTube channels. Follow us on Instagram and, well, my TikTok. And do everything you've got to do to stay up to date with everything going on here at the Parent Advocate Podcast. Bye.